like, yeah, you know, he called like, yeah, Spice, yeah. He like, yeah, they had a Snoop trailer out there, and some blood over there, you know, throwing, you know, bottles at
The person in charge of that movie made a lot of mistakes.
American Me.
Yeah, lied about getting permission to do it.
And from what I understand, some of the people featured in that movie, like I think like got
Alright, picture this. Real-life gangsters showing up on Hollywood movie sets. Crazy, right? But it happens. And it's about time we spill the beans on it. You know those movies that try to tell the story of gangsters but end up getting it all wrong? Well, turns out some real-life gangsters aren't too happy about it. They're rolling up to these sets not to audition, but to set the record straight. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into some real jaw-dropping tales of when the streets meet the silver screen. This is where things get real interesting, folks. Quote, those of us who had done serious time on the streets and in prisons knew threats from prominent gangs could and should never be dismissed. Unfortunately, these foreboding words, once uttered by Danny Trejo, came too late, and the consequences turned out to be fatal. In 1992, Edward James Olmos made his directorial debut with American Me, a crime drama that explored the grisly and violent world of Mexican street gangs.
We're spending all of our time dealing with the Italians. And now with the Black Guerrilla family, you say?
It's all about gangs and crime set in the wild streets of Los Angeles. It kicks off during the Zoot Suit riots of '43. There's this young couple, Esperanza and Pedro, just trying to live their lives, but bam, they get targeted by some sailors, beaten up bad. It's rough, man. Esperanza even gets assaulted by the sailors' gang. Years later, the Santana family's teenage son Montoya forms a gang along with his friends JD and Mundo. The three friends soon find themselves committing crimes and are arrested. At the age of 18, he and his amigos JD and Mundo form a gang and go on little misadventures. While evading another street gang, they break into someone's house. JD is shot by the house owner, while Santana and Mundo are sent to juvenile jail. Santana is arred by another inmate, but then he stabs the artist and earns respect among the prisoners. JD turns up in the prison a year later, and the old friendship is revived. For the M, Santana earns himself a place in the Folsom State Prison. Infamous gangs such as the Aryan Brotherhood and the Black Guerrilla family vie for dominance in the prison territory, but soon the charismatic figure of Santana gains the trust of the fellow Chicanos. Santana's gang La M gains prominence in the underworld behind bars. La M smuggles drugs and other illegal items into the prison through their established networks on the outside. When a drug package is stolen by one of the inmates, La M gets in direct conflict with the Black Guerrilla family as they off the drug thief. The rivalry gets bitter and more people get offed in a domino effect set off by Santana himself. The Chicanos off one of their own, Pieface. A new member, Little Puppet, is ordered to off a Black Guerrilla leader, and he does the job with some difficulty. Things change rapidly for Santana. JD completes his sentence, and Santana gets to know from his brother Paulito about the death of his mother. After being released from prison, Santana finds it difficult to adjust to the outer world. He tries to relate his life experiences to the society that has changed so much since he was incarcerated. La M has become a feared criminal organization beyond Folsom, selling drugs and committing M. Santana begins a romantic relationship with a woman named Julie, but she becomes repulsed by his violent tendencies, and by La M's negative influence on their community. After a drug lord refuses to give control of distribution to La M retaliates by brutally R-ing and Emming the drug lord's son in prison. In response, the drug lord targets Santana's community by distributing Pure H to local users. The Pure H causes mass overdoses, and one of the overdose victims is Julie's brother. Santana visits his mother's grave, where his father reveals that he always resented Santana because he might have been the son of his mother's artist. Santana starts to see the error of his ways. Before he can take action, however, he is sent back to Folsom for drug possession. When JD visits, Santana tells him that he is no longer interested in leading La M. However, following a precedent set by Santana himself earlier in the film, his men, including Mundo, M him to show the other prison gangs that La M is not weak and will not tolerate departures from its ranks. Santana is fatally stabbed and thrown off a balcony to his death. Julie receives a letter from Santana thanking her for opening his eyes. The letter contains his necklace of St. Dismas. Julie gives the necklace to Santana's teen brother Paulito, who then inducts a young boy into La M by having him commit a drive-by shooting. Alright, here's the scoop on the movie reception straight from the streets. So Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times thought the flick was real, you know? Like, it showed the gritty truth about gangs and prisons and how they're all mixed up with drug money taking a whole criminal scene. He was feeling that vibe. But then Janet Maslin from the New York Times wasn't quite vibing with it. She thought the director, Mr. Olmos, was going for this dark, slow vibe that sucked the energy out of the film. Like, it was violent, sure, but it wasn't popping off enough to really grab you, you know? It was like watching paint dry, she said. Now, Marjorie Baumgarten from the Austin Chronicle had some love for the movie. She said it was made with heart and smarts, and it wasn't pulling punches. It was telling you straight up there ain't no easy fixes to the stuff it's showing, but we gotta deal with it like yesterday. She was all about that urgency. And get this, folks, the movie even made it to the big leagues at the Cannes Film Festival back in '92, getting screened in this fancy section called Uncertain Regard. That's like the VIP section for movies, you know? So that's saying something. Now, when it comes to the ratings, reception's got a mixed bag. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting at a solid 73% based on 11 reviews. People are giving it a nod, but it ain't blowing minds left and right. Over on Metacritic, it's doing okay with a score of 66%, which basically means most critics are giving it a thumbs up, but not everyone's head over heels. The concept and overall production looked promising for Hollywood standards, but there were watchful eyes in places beyond the movie theater that weren't so keen on what was being unveiled before then. When Mexican mafia leader Joe Morgan caught wind of the project and several factual errors embedded in its story, he made it a point to communicate his disapproval by any means necessary. Morgan reached out to former prison friend turned Hollywood star Danny Trejo, who was offered a role in the film, and warned him of the potential ramifications that would arise from the blatant misrepresentation of his crime syndicate. As it turned out, he wasn't bluffing. See, some bits in the movie rubbed them the wrong way, like there was this main guy who did some bad stuff when he was young, and then his own crew turned on him at the end. The Mexican mafia didn't like how they were shown in the movie. They thought it made them look bad, or maybe they just didn't like someone poking around their business. The segments of the Mexican mafia were enraged by the film, specifically the lead character's R as a juvenile and his death at the hands of his own followers at the end of his criminal career. Whether as retaliation over their depiction in the film, or as a routine criminal racket, Mexican mafia member Joe Pegleg Morgan, who served as the inspiration for the character of JD, allegedly attempted to extort money from Olmos. Court documents show that Olmos was a victim in one extortion count contained in a 33-count federal indictment. According to reportage by CBS News Weekly 60 Minutes, 3 consultants on this film were later emmed because of the depiction of a homo-SR scene which offended the Mexican mafia gangsters' machismo. Danny Trejo shared in his memoir, Trejo, My Life of Crime, Hollywood and Redemption, 2021, quote, "But my initial excitement quickly changed to dismay. 10 pages in, I knew there were going to be problems." The film contained certain scenarios, ethics, and behaviors that weren't characteristic of La M, a sector of the mafia that the film loosely depicts. Actor Danny Trejo said in an interview that he was aware of 10 people having been emmed for their involvement with the film. The first gang occurred 12 days after the film's premiere. Charlie Brown Manriquez, a former M who consulted the film's production team for story-building purposes, was shot to death in his Los Angeles home. Ana, the gang lady Lizarraga, also died in like fashion as a result of her consultation with the makers of American Me. Manuel Rocky Luna was also a former gang member who provided Edward James Olmos with expertise and was shot multiple times in his car. Even Olmos himself started receiving death threats, according to Gangster Report. 7 unnamed others took bullets before and after American Me hit screens. The killings were prompted mainly by one particular scene in which the character Montoya Santana, Olmos, who was based on real-life mafia head Rodolfo Cadena, gets Ard in prison. This never actually happened. Quote, "Producers in Hollywood don't always necessarily understand the nature of the people they are representing," Trejo wrote in his book, Training Day. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Training Day, you know it's a gritty tale set in the streets. But did you know Denzel Washington, the star of the show, had to play it smart with the real-life street gangs, particularly the Crips, to make sure everything went smoothly? Here's the kicker. Denzel Washington, before shooting Training Day, knew he had to check in with the Crips, a well-known street gang. Rumor has it he understood the importance of respecting their turf and their culture, so before cameras started rolling, he made sure to show them the proper respect. Hollywood and the streets don't always mix well, but Denzel Washington was determined to bridge that gap. He knew that filming in certain neighborhoods meant he had to earn the respect of the locals, including the Crips. Word on the street is that Denzel didn't just waltz onto their turf and start shooting. No sir. He knew he had to handle things delicately, so he made arrangements to check in with the Crips leaders before filming began. This wasn't about asking permission, it was about showing respect. Now let's talk about why this was so important. You see, the Crips aren't just any street gang. They've got history, they've got pride, and they've got respect. And Denzel Washington understood that. By reaching out to them, he showed that he wasn't just some Hollywood hotshot trying to make a buck off their lifestyle. He showed that he understood their world and that he was willing to play by their rules. And you know what? The Crips respected him for it. They saw that Denzel wasn't trying to exploit them or their neighborhood. He was trying to tell a story and he wanted to do it right. So when it came time to shoot the movie, they had his back. Denzel's approach paid off big time. Not only did Training Day become a box office hit, but it also earned critical acclaim. And a big part of that success was thanks to Denzel's street smarts. But hold on, there's another side to this story. Snoop Dogg, the rap legend, tells it a bit differently. He recalls being invited to join the cast of Training Day. Picture Snoop, cool as ever, stepping onto the set, ready to do his thing. But guess what? He's greeted by Blood Gang members. Not exactly the welcoming committee he expected. Here's where it gets interesting. Snoop, representing the Crips with his blue outfit, found himself surrounded by the rival Bloods. It's like stepping into a lion's den only to realize you're wearing zebra stripes.
Say, what you want to wear in the movie? I'm like, give me a blue sweatsuit and get with my blue chucks. They didn't tell me where it was. We get to that, there's 100,000 Bloods on the corner. I'm in a wheelchair like that. Damn.
But Snoop being Snoop, he handled it like a pro. He didn't let the colors or the tension get to him. Instead, he did what he does best. He brought people together. He shared blunts with the oldest Blood OG, breaking the ice and showing that sometimes respect knows no colors.
I rolled away. I went to that little wig shop. I said, hey man, go find the OG from here and bring that down here. They went and found the OG they could find.
Boys in the Hood. Now, there was this crazy story about the movie Boys in the Hood. Yeah, it's not just about what happens on screen, but what went down in real life too. Picture this, gangs from different hoods all heading to the same cinema to catch the flick. Sounds like a recipe for trouble, right? Well, you bet it was. Well, back in the day when Boys in the Hood hit theaters, it caused a whole lot of chaos, and not just because of what was happening in the movie. Nah, it's because of what went down in the streets after the credits rolled. You see, folks from rival gangs all wanted a piece of the action. They heard about this movie showing the gritty reality of life in the hood and they wanted to see it for themselves. But here's where it gets real interesting. Instead of just chilling and watching the movie like regular folks, things got heated. Gangs from opposite sides of town ended up in the same theater, and you can imagine what happened next. Yup, it turned into a war zone, right there in the cinema. Can you believe it? Now you might be thinking, come on, it's just a movie. But for these guys, it was more than that. It was about representing their turf, showing who's boss. And when you mix that kind of pride with a crowded theater and some serious tension, well, let's just say things get escalated real quick. Next thing you know, shots are fired, chaos erupts, and people are running for their lives. It wasn't just one isolated incident either. Nope, it spread like wildfire with reports of shootings in theaters all across America. Imagine being there just wanting to watch a movie and suddenly finding yourself caught up in a real-life nightmare. It's the kind of stuff you see in movies, except this time it was all too real. But here's the thing. It wasn't the movie itself that caused the violence, nah. It was the streets, the rivalries, the tensions that were already simmering long before the lights dimmed and the trailers started rolling. Sure, Boys in the Hood might have been the spark that set it all off, but the real fuel was the deep-rooted issues in our communities. It was about poverty, inequality, and a whole lot of pain. The then executive director of a Los Angeles agency that intervened in gang disputes told the New York Times, quote, "If every gang territory had its own movie house, we would not have a problem. We knew that some gang members were deciding not only what clothes to wear, but what armaments to take along. They prepare for the worst. The film just created a new venue. The movie itself has a good message. We reviewed it. It had nothing to do with the violence. So the next time you watch Boys in the Hood, remember that it's more than just a movie. It's a reminder of the harsh realities of life in the hood and the consequences of letting tensions boil over. New Jack City. Now, in July 1991, something went down that stirred up a whole lot of trouble. You know that movie with Wesley Snipes called New Jack City? Yeah, that one. Well, when it hit the screens, things got real messy real quick. People were getting riled up outside theaters, but this wasn't the first time something like this happened. Way earlier in the year, when they were showing New Jack City, it caused a lot of chaos too. Now let's backtrack a bit to understand what was going on. The crack coke scene was blowing up big time in LA since 1984. It was like a wildfire spreading fast and causing all sorts of problems. And then there was this guy Rodney King. He got arrested at the end of March, just adding fuel to the fire. Fast forward to April 1992 and things really hit the fan. You see, there was this thing called the Rodney King riots. It lasted a crazy 6 days. Why? Because a bunch of cops got off the hook for beating Rodney King, even though everyone saw them doing it on video. Yeah, you heard me right, they beat him with their batons like there was no tomorrow, and then they said they did nothing wrong. Can you believe that? So back to New Jack City. The movie was like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. When people saw it, especially in the middle of all this tension, it was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Black communities were already feeling the heat from everything going on, and then they see this movie portraying them in a certain way. It didn't sit right with them. After all the chaos, they decided to take New Jack City out of theaters. But guess what? They just made things worse. People felt like the industry was trying to silence them, trying to sweep their voices under the rug. It was like a slap in the face. Now imagine you're in their shoes. You're already dealing with all this injustice, all this violence, and then they take away something that speaks to you, that represents you. It's like they're saying your story doesn't matter. Can you see why people got so angry? Rumor has it the folks behind New Jack City didn't see it coming. They thought they were just making a movie, not realizing the impact it would have. But here's where it gets interesting. Movies aren't just movies, especially when they touch on real-life issues. They can spark conversations, ignite emotions, and sometimes even set off a powder keg. So the next time you watch a movie or hear about something in the news, think about the bigger picture. It's not just entertainment or headlines. It's people's lives, their stories, their struggles, and sometimes those stories hit a little too close to home. The Godfather. Now let's talk about the famous movie The Godfather. Well, it's got some real-life mobster drama behind the scenes that's as wild as the movie itself. So here's the scoop. Marlon Brando, who played the big boss Vito Corleone, had a run-in with some actual mobsters during filming. Yep, you heard that right, Marlon Brando. The legendary actor was getting fed up with these guys tailing him around like paparazzi. They were mobsters, see? They weren't just any old fans or curious onlookers. They were the real deal, the guys with connections to the underworld. So what does Brando do? He decides to give them a taste of their own medicine. One day when they were shadowing him on set, he dropped his pants and showed them his backside. Can you believe it? He mooned them right then and there. That's like saying, hey, you're bothering me, so here's a piece of my mind. Now you'd think that would scare them off, right? Wrong. Instead of backing off, these mobsters got even angrier. They were fuming. They didn't take too kindly to Brando's bold move. They were probably thinking, who does this Hollywood guy think he is? They wanted revenge and they wanted it bad. But here's where it gets interesting. Francis Ford Coppola, the guy in charge of the movie, had a brilliant idea. He figured if these mobsters wanted to be part of the action so badly, why not put them in the movie? It's like turning a problem into an opportunity. So that's exactly what he did. He hired some real-life mafia gangsters to play minor roles in the film. That way they'd be too busy acting to bother Brando or anyone else on set. It's like saying if you can't beat them, join them. And you know what? It worked like a charm. Once these mobsters were part of the production, they stopped causing trouble. They were too busy trying to remember their lines and hit their marks. It's like they forgot all about their beef with Brando and focused on their new gig instead. Now you might be wondering, why would Brando do something so risky in the first place? Well, rumor has it that he was tired of being harassed by these guys. He wanted to show them that he wasn't afraid of them, that he wouldn't be pushed around. And you know what? It worked. Sure, it might have been a gutsy move, but sometimes you gotta stand up for yourself, even if it means showing your behind to a bunch of mobsters. But let's not forget the real heroes here. The filmmakers who turned a potentially dangerous situation into a stroke of genius. They took a problem and turned it into an opportunity, all while making one of the greatest movies of all time. So the next time you watch The Godfather, just remember, behind the scenes, there was some real-life drama going on. And it's all thanks to Marlon Brando and those persistent mobsters who just couldn't stay away. Ain't that a story for the ages?